So, hi everybody that's just joined us or is logging in to join us. I imagine we'll have a few people joining in here over the next couple of minutes. We're just right at 10 o'clock. I would like to welcome everybody. Let me get this up so you see who's talking here. Hi, I'm Lisa. And I direct the St. Louis Storytelling Festival. We're a University of Missouri Extension program, and we are really pleased to bring you some online virtual storytelling. This is our revised virtual St. Louis Storytelling Festival for 2020. We've got schools out storytime sessions for elementary age kids and their families every Tuesday and Thursday at 10 o'clock. We've got Way Back Wednesdays historical stories for older kids and adults every Wednesday at 10 o'clock. We've got Thursday Later Tales for adults every Thursday at 7 p.m. And we are going to start a digital Decameron for people to share stories of life in quarantine, just as the travelers in Italy did during the medieval times of the plague. And that's called our digital Decameron, and that's every Friday at 7 p.m. All of these sessions are available via the Zoom link that you used to get it here today. For those of you joining on Facebook Live, I put the Zoom link up there. You can also just log in right from Facebook if you like. Couple of housekeeping items. I do want to thank a couple of our funders for making this possible. We have grants from the Missouri Arts Council and from the National Endowment for the Arts, and I would also like to thank the Kransberg Arts Foundation, Edward Jones, and many of our individual friends and donors who have donated in support of storytelling in St. Louis. The festival has been going on for 40 years here in St. Louis, and we're really thrilled to be able to keep this tradition alive. And want to give a big thank you to all of those friends and donors and sponsors. And I want to especially give a thank you to University of Missouri Extension for making this festival possible. So everybody should have a chat box up there for you logging in on Zoom. I've typed in some notes, I've typed in a welcome message, and I've also typed in a link to a survey form. We'd love to get your feedback. We'd love to know how we can improve this experience for the future, and just kind of want to know where you're logging in from. So if you can take just a few seconds at the end of the session today, the survey link is up there. It's a Google document, and the link is up there at the top, and I'll remind everybody as we come to the end. For those of you joining from Facebook, I will, the Zoom link is up there, and I will also put the survey link up there as well. So without further ado, I would like to welcome our storyteller for today. Rick Weiss is going to be telling stories called Twice Upon a Time. And Rick has been a, hi, Brian from Bishop Hill, Illinois. Rick has been a longtime regional teller for the festival. He tells all kinds of tales, folk tales, he tells science stories, he tells folk tales from around the world. And he also tells true personal stories, and he's been a frequent contributor to our monthly open mic called Story Lounge, which is always the fourth Thursday when we're able to do live in-person storytelling. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over now to Rick Weiss. He's going to do his stories called Twice Upon a Time. So please help me welcome Rick Weiss.
Hi, Lisa. Well,
Hi.
We're here today to have a little fun with some stories from around the world. The first story I'm going to tell you today has some words that you won't know, so I want to tell you what they are now. Lele means little. So I'm going to say Lele and you're going to say little, and I'm not going to hear you. So I say Lele and you say, very good. Goro means girl. So Lele and Goro means little girl. And this is a story from the Temne tribe in Sierra Leone called Lele Goro. Long ago, when the earth was set down and the sky was lifted up, all the animals in the jungle were sitting around the first fire, and they were warm and they were happy. It was wonderful to see the light from the fire. But all of a sudden, a storm came in and lightning hit and thunder, and it began to rain. And they were cold and they were wet and all the animals were miserable. Now the next morning, when they all woke up, they gathered together around in a circle, and Lion, who tended to be the head of things, looked around and he said, you know, over in the distance over there, I see smoke. And where there's smoke, there's always fire. And he looked around at the circle of animals, and there was an antelope and a leopard and an elephant and a spider and a conch. A conch is like a snail, only way bigger. In fact, a conch looks like this. Now, the lion looked around that circle and he looked at all the animals and he said, I want one of you to go and get the fire. And he pointed right to the antelope, and the antelope said, I'll go and get the fire. I have long horns and sharp teeth, and I have hooves that I can run very fast. And so the antelope bounded across the jungle over to the other side, and he ended up seeing the smoke coming out of this little hut. The little hut had a woman standing on the porch, and the antelope bounded right up to her and said, Ma'am, I've come for the fire. Bring me the fire. And the little lady said, well, you can get the fire, but first you're gonna have to fight my daughter. The antelope said, where is she? I'll fight the little girl. And the woman pointed over next to the hut to this tiny little girl. She was about 4 years old. She was a Lele Goro. And the antelope said, you want me to fight that little girl? You want me to kill your daughter? And the little woman said, well, we'll see about that. But first we have to go around to the fighting pit. And before we do that, we have to sing our song. I'm going to sing the song and you can sing it back to me. I'll leave you a space. Eh, Lele Goro, fight 'em, Lele Goro. Throw 'em high in the sky. Won't get back till tomorrow. So they went around to the fighting pit. And it looked like a WWF wrestling ring with red ropes and gold pillars and a bell. Ding! Lele Goro got up next to the bell, and the antelope jumped over the ropes and into the middle of the fighting pit. He turned around to face her with his horns pointing right at her. And Lele Goro reached up to the bell and went, ding! Round one. That little girl stood in the middle of the fighting pit, and the antelope snorted and came closer and stuck his horns out. He moved closer and closer to the little girl, but when he got as close as he could get, she grabbed his horns, lifted him over her head, and threw it into the air. The antelope flew up higher and higher and higher and higher and higher until gravity took over and he came back down. Boom! He hit the fighting pit, which was made of sand, and the sand got up in his throat and he began to cough. And if you see an antelope today in the jungle, he will cough like that. He will make that sound because Lele Goro gave him that cough. That poor antelope went back over to where the lion and all the animals were at the other side of the jungle. And he said, oh, that little girl threw me high into the air and she got sand in my throat and now I have the cough. I did not get the fire. So Lion thought maybe he was going to have to go get the fire, and that worried him very much. And he looked around at the other animals in the circle and he pointed to the leopard. And he said, leopard, will you go and get the fire? And the leopard said, yes, I'll get the fire. I have strong claws and big teeth. I'll go and get the fire. And so the leopard ran through the jungle over to the little hut where the woman stood. And the leopard said, man, I've come for the fire. And the woman said, well, first you have to fight my daughter. She's right over there. And he looked over astonished and he said, that is fine. I will fight that little girl. So they went around to the fighting pit. But before they did, they had to sing their song. Hey, Lele Goro, fight 'em, Lele Goro. Throw 'em high in the sky. Won't get back till tomorrow. They went around to the fighting pit and the antelope just jumped over the ropes. Little Lele Goro was so small she had to go down under the ropes. And that leopard started to he made a terrible sound and he reached out with his sharp claws and he began to circle Lele Goro round and round, getting behind her. And he changed directions. But he waved his tail in front of that little girl and she grabbed the tail in her two hands and swung him around. And up the leopard went into the sky. He went higher and higher and higher. And when he started to fall back down, he hit a rock, whack, and blood began to drip out of his mouth. And the blood dropped onto his beautiful golden coat. And from that day on, that leopard had spots because when the blood dried, it turned black. And leopard has spots because Lele Goro gave those spots to him. That poor leopard wandered back over to the camp where the lion was and he said, I did not get the fire. That little girl made my mouth bad and I got blood on my coat. And now I have these ugly spots. I could not get the fire. Lion was even more worried because it became ever more present that he might have to go and get the fire. But next he pointed to Elephant. And Elephant said, Elephant, will you go get the fire? And Elephant said, yes, I will get the fire. I have a long trunk. And my trunk can grab her like a hand. My trunk will grab little Lele Goro. And so the elephant stomped off through the jungle and he ended up at the house and he looked at the lady with his long trunk stretched out and he said, I've come for the fire. And the lady said, well, first you're gonna have to fight my daughter. But before we do that, we have to sing our song. And they went around to the fighting pit singing their song. Hey, Lele Goro, fight 'em, Lele Goro. Throw 'em high in the sky. Won't get back till tomorrow. They went around to the fighting pit and that lion, he just stamped down those ropes. And he crawled over into the pit and he puffed himself up and he reached out and little Lele Goro snuck in to him and moved towards him. And then all of a sudden, the lion looked over and thought, what are they going to do? But the elephant came through and he reached out with his trunk and he tried to grab Lele Goro. And he began to reach with that trunk over and over, but Lele Goro was so fast, she almost escaped him every time. But he came closer and closer with that trunk until all of a sudden he started to get worried and bored. And so he thought, I'll just fill my body with air and I'll point my trunk right at that little girl and I'll blow her into the sky. Then I'll get the fire. So the elephant began to puff himself up. He got bigger and bigger, and Lele Goro was right in front of him, and he pointed that trunk right at that little girl, and he began to think about blowing. But just as he was about to let out his breath, Lele Goro clamped her hand around that trunk, and that poor elephant began to swell up like a balloon. He got bigger and bigger, and he started to float off the ground, and his eyes bulged out, and his face turned red, and then it went to green and to blue, and he lifted higher off the ground and higher and higher, and just as Lele Goro could hold him no longer, she let go. He flew around in the air like a balloon until he smacked against the ropes of the fighting pit. His teeth in the front began to swell up and go longer and longer and longer until all of a sudden he had tusks. And to that day, if you see an elephant, he has those tusks because Lele Goro gave them to him. The elephant sauntered back through the jungle to where the lion was and said, oh, my mouth hurts. I have these long, long tusks, and I can barely hold my head up. I did not get the fire. Well, Lion was so scared he was going to have to go. He decided to pick the next thing he saw, the next animal, and there, right in front of him, was the spider. And the spider looked at him, and he looked at the spider and he said, Spider, will you go get the fire? And the spider said, yes, I'll get the fire. I have poison in my fangs, and I can shoot it into Lele Goro's hand and knock her out. I can get the fire. And in that day, you know, Spider only had 4 legs. A spider had 4 legs. So that 4-legged spider went across through the jungle over to the house where the little woman was. And he looked up and he said, I've come for the fire. And the old woman said, where are you? I can't see you. I'm down here. She looked down and there was the spider. And she said, well, if you want to fight my daughter, first we have to go around to the fighting pit. And before we do that, we have to sing our song. Hey, Lele Goro, fight 'em, Lele Goro. Throw 'em high in the sky. Won't get back till tomorrow. So that spider went around to the fighting pit. And Lele Goro just jumped in as the spider jumped in. And the spider jumped up onto her hand. And he tried to stab her with his fangs, but she flipped him over on his back and took her fingers and boom, shot him against a tree. When he hit that tree, smack, his 4 legs became 8 legs. And from this day on, all spiders have 8 legs because Lele Goro gave them to him. Now the spider went back and said, I have these weak little legs now. I can't crawl. It's terrible. And Lion thought, it's my turn. But all of a sudden, in the middle of the jungle, came a conch. A conch. A conch looks very much like a snail, but it's way bigger. And the conch came across and he looked up at the lion and he said, I can get the fire. I have a shell. I can get the fire. And I can get the fire and I can see it with my two little eyes. I love fire. I can get the fire. And the lion said, you are too small. And he slapped the conch right on his shell. Whack! And if you look at a conch shell today, if I can get it in the light just right, you will see these ridges on the conch shell because that's where the lion slapped him. The conch went across the jungle on a sticky foot and he went like this. But the conch was wise. He did not go to the front of the house first. He went around to the back and he covered the pit in mucus, his sticky, sticky slime, and he got it all over the pit. Then he went around the front and looked up at the little old lady and said, I've come for the fire. And she said, this is ridiculous. You are too slow. We will go around to the fighting pit, but we will not sing the song. So they went around to the fighting pit. And the conch slid into the middle. Lele Goro got up high on one of the ropes. And she thought, this will be easy. I will get this conch. And she jumped into the pit, but she hit the mucus and went sliding across the pit. And when she slid across the pit, the conch slapped her on the behind. Whack! And he reached out with his one sticky foot and lifted her up and threw her into the air. She catapulted high into the sky. And when she got higher and higher and would not come, little Lele Goro was really frightened. And she looked down at her mother, who was down by the hut, and she said, oh, I'm so scared, Mom. I'm so scared. And that brought fear into the world for the very first time. Now, eventually, the breeze subsided and Lele Goro began to shift and come down. And when she did, her mother instinctively reached up one hand and another hand and gave her a hug. And that brought hugging into the world for the very first time. From that day on, all parents knew that when their children are sad, they should give them a hug. And that's the story of Lele Goro. I hope you liked it. I have some things to show you. Thanks for the applause, Joyce. I hope this looks the right way to you. I'm going to pick it up. The tail comes from Sierra Leone, which is on the west of Africa, and that's where it's at. Now, if you want to answer some questions in the chat for me, I'm going to show you some things. These are the children of the Temne tribe. Sorry, we're getting reflections here. And I want you to tell me, I have to flip this in real time. What you think this animal is. So if you're in the chat room, you can type it in for me. Then the story had this animal. Do you know what this animal is? If you do, type it into the chat for me. Does anybody know what this is? Looks like Mark's going to type. Then we have this animal. Then we have a lot of pages is what we have. Does anybody know what this animal is high in the tree? That's a very scary animal, but he got those spots. Very good. Does anybody know what this animal is? Surely you know what that is. If I can back up and get that, there we go. And this animal now has 8 legs, just like in the story. So you can tell me what that is in the chat. I say, it's a leopard, Jesse. Very good. These are not pictures I took, somebody asked me. I did not go there. I wish I had. And this is the conch shell. And you can see the ridges on this conch shell where the lion gave you the ridges. So now we have a different kind of story. Oh, by the way, that story came from this book. It's called Misoso, and it was written by Virna Ardima. That's my version of the story. And believe it or not, right now, if you wanted to order this book on your favorite bookseller, you could probably get it. It's very inexpensive for some reason. They made lots of copies of it. So that's where that story came from. Now we're going to do a different kind of story. I have to bend over here. In Japan, when they tell stories, they use picture cards. And I've got to get my picture cards ordered here. And I hope you can all see them. Tell me if you can't. I'm trying to make sure we don't get much of a glare here. Let's turn that one down a little bit. No, that doesn't help. Give me a sec. We're going to get a reflection. I'll just try to test it. This is a Japanese picture card. And we tell stories with the picture cards. So I'll tell the story to you, but I'm going to use the cards to help you learn the story. Long ago, there was a tub maker. And the tub maker loved to make little tubs for people to put pickles in. And he loved to make big tubs so people could actually take a bath. If you can imagine, people took a bath in tubs at one time. And so one day the tub maker was hammering into the tub. He was hammering the nails so hard, clink, clink, clink. And all of a sudden, one of the metal springs that held the tub together let go and exploded, pshoom, and shot him clear into the sky. He went way up into the sky. And when he came back down, he landed on the belly of Thunder God, an Oni. These are giants in Japan. And the tub maker bounced off his body and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry." And the giant said, "Who are you? And what are you doing here?" "Oh, my tub exploded and I didn't know what to do. So I just ended up on your belly. I'm so sorry." And he said, "That's all right. I think it's time. We'll make it rain a little bit. And so I'm going to give you this giant watering can. And you can make it rain. And I'll take my drum and I'll make it thunder." And so the tub maker and the giant made it thunder. They went shh, 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 boom, 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 shh, 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 boom, 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 shh, 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 boom, boom, boom. And they were having so much fun, they didn't realize that it had created pandemonium below. It was terrible down below on the street. A dog bit a man. Fish were falling out of barrels. People were bumping into one another's heads. It was a mess. And they kept going, shh, 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 boom, boom, boom. And finally, the giant tired of it, so he decided he would go to sleep. But the tub maker was having so much fun that he continued making rain. Shh, 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 until he didn't pay attention and he fell down through a crack in the clouds. Ah! Shoom. That poor tub maker landed in the top of a very, very tall pine. The pine was so tall that when he shouted down, "Hey, I'm up here, I'm up here," the monk who was below couldn't find him. He said, "Where are you?" I'm up in the tree. Oh, there you are. This is hilarious, said the monk. I have seen it rain cats and dogs, but I've never seen it rain a tub maker before. The tub maker said, oh, please, can you help me? I'm stuck in the tree and the branches don't go low enough for me to climb down. Well, the priest thought a little bit and he decided he'd gather some help. But all of a sudden there were all these people around the tree. They said, look at that tub maker way up in that tree. Oh my goodness, that's really funny. I bet he's stuck up there forever. And the tub maker said, oh, I hope not. But the priest had a solution. He asked some of his parishioners to go and get the tapestry from off the wall of the monastery. And so they went and they got the tapestry and they took the tapestry and they stretched it out like a giant trampoline. A trampoline is a thing you bounce on. So the tub maker looked down and he said, I don't know. But the priest looked up and said, yes, you can do it. And the tub maker began to jump and he hit the trampoline. And he went back up in the air higher and he hit it again. And he went up higher again. And the third time he hit it so hard that all the people smacked heads. Ah! And sparks began to fly. And the sparks lit the tree on fire. And from that day on, the tub maker decided never to go to the sky again because it was far too dangerous. Fortunately for him, the fire generated pine cones to come down and plant and seeds to plant, and so that there would be trees again. And that's the Kamishibai story of the tub maker who fell from the sky. If you want to know more about that, sorry, I have to go in and out of the camera. There's a wonderful book called The Kamishibai Man. It tells about how Japanese storytellers told Kamishibai stories and how that was done in Japan. I won't go into it in great detail, but they used to do things for silent films, but I'm sure most of you have never seen a silent film. So my next story is a fairy tale. Here I am again. This is not the typical way people tell this fairy tale. I hope that some of you know about Sleeping Beauty, about the prince and the kiss and the long nap and the briars. But this is a different version of that story. Once upon a time, there was a princess named Miserella. She was the meanest, wickedest, nastiest princess ever to come into the world. She threw pies in the cook's face. She kicked kittens. Meow. She never said please or thank you. And besides, she told lies. Now, one day, Princess Miserella left the palace in a huff. A huff is not a kind of carriage that you ride in. It's a temper tantrum, her usual kind. She immediately got lost in the deep, dark forest because she got on her horse and hadn't paid attention to where she was going. And when she got lost, she got off the horse and kicked it for losing the way. Terrible. That princess was nasty. Now the horse had known the way back anyway, but he was not about to tell that princess, so he took off and left her in the woods. There was Princess Miserella, lost in the woods, hopelessly lost. And she looked around and then she saw a giant spreading oak tree. And under the oak tree, there was a little old woman. And the little old woman, she thought, because little old women who sleep under trees deep in a dark, dark forest are generally fairy godmothers. So Princess Miserella went over to the fairy godmother and kicked her on the bottoms of her feet. Boom, boom. That poor woman got up because her feet hurt, and she grabbed Princess Miserella by her thumb and her forefinger because she knew with princesses that kind of thing counts. They left, wandering off in the woods to try to find some way to get home. Meanwhile, in another part of the woods lived Plain Jane. She really was. Her hair was short and turned down, and her nose was long and turned up. And even if she had been the other way around, she was not that great looking. But she lived in the forest in a little cottage where the floors sank and the walls stank and the roof leaked, even on great days. Now, she invited all the animals to live with her in the forest. And maybe that's why the floors stank and the walls sank, but we'll never know. All of a sudden, there was a knock on the front door. And she opened the door, and there was Princess Miserella and the fairy godmother. Plain Jane looked at them and said, "Hello, my home is your home." Princess Miserella walked over the threshold with the fairy godmother in tow. She looked around the little cottage which stank, and she said, "This is not my home. This place is ugly." The fairy godmother said, "Hey, you must be nice to her." But Miserella said, "I don't like this place." But the fairy godmother said, "If you can get us home, I think I could squeeze a wish out of this wand. Maybe 2, perhaps 3. And so the princess looked at her and said, "That's dumb. That's a dumb way to have wishes. I don't like that." And the fairy godmother looked at Princess Miserella and said, "Do not call someone dumb if you haven't been properly introduced or are a member of the immediate family." And with that, the fairy godmother raised her wand and turned Princess Miserella's foot to stone. Chink! She fell to the floor. Boom. Then Miserella looked awful on the floor, and she didn't know what to do. But Plain Jane said, "Oh, I do like stone things, but could you turn your foot back to normal?" Fairy godmother said, "I like your manners, but not your taste." She waved the wand and turned her foot back to normal. Princess Miserella got up and said, "That was a stupid way to waste a wish. It was really stupid." Fairy godmother looked at her and said, "If you say stupid one more time, I am going to make toads come out of your mouth." And Princess Miserella, who was miserable, went, "Stupid, stupid, stupid." And with that, the fairy godmother waved her wand, and a giant toad came out of her mouth and onto the ground. More toads. There were toads all over the floor. Toads covered the whole bottom of the cottage. Plain Jane looked up at the fairy godmother and said, "Well, I do love amphibians, but could you get rid of the mouth toads?" And so she waved her wand and got rid of the mouth toads. With that, the fairy godmother was getting increasingly angry, and Miserella was marching around the cottage saying, "I want to go, I want to go." And the fairy godmother waved her wand and went, "To sleep." The fairy godmother, Plain Jane, and the princes all fell asleep because the wall broke and her wand broke. It was one of those 100-year naps that take a prince and a kiss to wake her. They slept through the invention of the sewing machine, the discovery of a new continent, and whatever else happened in 100 years. After that, there was a prince who went through and was walking through the forest, and he thought, oh, it's raining. By the way, this prince's name was Jojo, who had no gold or property or jewels to speak of. It began to rain, so he saw the cottage with the roof sagging and the hole in the wall, and he crawled over to get out of the rain. When he got out of the rain, he looked around the cottage, and there were these 3 women on the cottage, and he was aghast because he knew if you wanted to wake them up, you had to kiss them. And he'd only kissed his mom, and that didn't count. And he'd kissed his father, but his father had a beard. So he looked around and he saw the fairy godmother on the floor. And he thought, she looked enough like his mother, he'd give her a kiss. So Jojo went over and he gave the fairy godmother a kiss right on the cheek. She began to stir. And he got braver. So he went over to look at Princess Miserella. And she was having a bad dream and enjoying it. Ah, it was so sad. Because Prince Jojo knew that with princesses like that, there's a problem. They're pretty on the outside and ugly within. So he went over to the fairy godmother. And then he went back to Plain Jane and he gave her a big smooch. And Jane woke up and she said, ah, I wish he loved me. And the fairy godmother rose with her wand and said, good wish. And Prince Jojo immediately fell in love with Plain Jane and said to her, ah, I think I love you. What's your name? Well, you probably wonder what happened to the princes and the fairy godmother and Plain Jane. Plain Jane and Prince Jojo got married. And they fixed the roof and the wall and made it a lovely cottage and even built a side room for the fairy godmother. But with Miserella, they decided never to wake her up. And so when people would come over for company, they'd set her in the middle of the living room as a conversation piece. Or if they had parties, they'd turn her upside down and let people hang their hats and coats on her. But they never let anyone kiss her, including their children, who numbered 3. The moral to this story is, let sleeping princesses lie or lying princesses sleep, whichever seems the wisest. And that's the story of Sleeping Ugly. Thanks so much for joining us today. I've had such a great time with you all. If you want to type in and tell me the difference between Sleeping Beauty and Sleeping Ugly, you could do that real quick, but we're about to run out of time. Sleeping Ugly is a book by Jane Yolen. It's easy to find, and for you folks who are just learning how to read, maybe in 2nd or 3rd grade, it's not too difficult, but it's a great story. So thanks, everyone. There'll be somebody else coming on next Tuesday, I believe. I'll turn it back over to Lisa, if Lisa's here. Hi, Lisa.
Hi. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to get my video back on.
Cheers, Lisa.
I hope everybody had a good time. I have the survey up there at the top. If you scroll back up to the top, I can recopy it in there. We'd love to get your feedback. I'd love to know what your favorite stories were. Anybody want to unmute themselves and shout out what their favorite story was?
It says Megan 59. He's trying to unmute. There.
All 3 of them.
Yay! Hi, Brian.
Hey, that was a great job. Love all the sound effects.
Thanks.
That was,
The picture story.
Lisa,
yeah.
how do you get to the survey?
It's at the top.
It's at the top. I'll copy it again here.
I don't see anything at the top.
Okay, I just put it in there again. Whoops, sorry, that was the wrong link. Here we go. Hi, I see some kids waving there. All right, let's see if I can get the link copied here. Whoops. Okay. All right. There we go. Hopefully everybody can see that survey link.
I
in
got
the
it now. Thank you.
Okay. I want to thank everybody for joining in today. We are going to resume with Schools Out Story Time every Tuesday and Thursday. Next week, we have some great stories about some people you may not have heard about. Mae Jemison is going to be the story, the person that the story is about on Tuesday. And then we'll have Way Back Wednesday history storytelling on Wednesday. And then we'll have another storyteller on Thursday. So we hope you can join us, and hope everybody has a good day and is staying safe. And thanks for joining in, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye.